Alrighty guys, so welcome to the next part of the course where we will be going over technical analysis. So technical analysis is basically where we chart stocks and we try to find certain patterns within them, whether that be support lines, resistance lines, supply and demand zones. It's basically just where you're drawing on the chart and trying to find patterns that you can trade. So some examples of technical analysis, right? So this is a quick example on the S&P 500. So you see this white line right here is our support line, right? So we'll talk about that, how you can draw them, but each time it comes down to this line, it bounces off, right? So you see we bounced off here, we bounced off here, bounced off here, right? So once it breaks below this support line, now it no longer has support, and you see we drop below. So that's just a very simple example, which we'll talk about also later. So support, resistance, and trends. Support is where we would look to buy something, so go long or buy calls, and this is the way we draw this is connecting the lows of each candle and using a trend line to try and find areas of bouncing. Resistance is the opposite. We connect the highs of the stock. The more candles or wicks that we touch on that resistance line makes it more valid. But if there's a ton of touches on a support line, it might mean we're going to break down, vice versa, right? And you can trade within a range too. So you don't have to just play support resistance. You can trade within the range, which we'll talk about eventually. Example of resistance, you see it's basically the opposite of our support lines, right? So here we have, we connect the highs, so like from here to here, we're connecting the highs, right? And we're drawing that line down. And we reject here, and reject here, and you can see you could have shorted this off of this, right? Could have shorted that each time that we came up to that resistance line and came back down. Then once we broke through resistance, that's when we started to move to the upside, right? So let's take a look at some real examples here. Let's delete this. Okay, so this is today on Apple, right? It is moving up a lot, right? So there's support somewhere. So if we take a trend line, we're going to draw it from the lows here. And we're going to connect, let's just connect from here to here, right? So if we just drew a line connecting these 2 points right here, the lows, we see we came back down, bounced off, started to move back up, right? And you could have also drawn a trend line like this. You could have drawn it up a little bit. So you could say we bounced here, we bounced here, we bounced here, we broke through, and then we kind of came down a little. So there's different areas where you can draw trend lines, right? They don't have to be necessarily perfect or exact. And now let's look at resistance lines, right? So you can see if we drew from, let's do this line right here. Now we're going from the top of the wick, and we connect it to there. So top of the wick connected to there. Then we reject here, and you can kind of say we rejected here. So that's just the basics of support and resistance, right? So we'll obviously be going over stuff in a lot more detail. And you'll see tons of examples of this, but you guys need to, practice this on your own. We'll still have lots of examples. But that's the basics of how you draw it, and we'll get into more how you use it later on. But yeah, that is the end of support and resistance.